Rauscher here. Welcome back to Chapter 5 of our book, Adult Spiritual Development, the journey from primitive ego to an enlightened consciousness. Today we're going to talk about aspects of our primitive ego. In this chapter we dig in a little bit more into primitive ego. There's a lot of material in this chapter, but I've tried to pull out 5 of what I think are more of the key points in the chapter. So let's get started. Number 1, our primitive ego is very, very narcissistic, very self-focused. And our primitive ego really does believe that it is the ruler of the known universe, okay? And I'll show you why in a second. But the basic concept here, the narcissistic self-view of the primitive ego, is always asking the question, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? Once we begin to understand that we really are caught up in our primitive ego, when we recognize that we're beginning to ask that question unconsciously, if we start to pay attention, we'll see it, of course, is what's in it for me? What we're missing, of course, once we have that ruler of the universe self-view, then what happens is that we lack empathy for other people. It's like if other people want something, it's a contest. They're trying to take something away from us. Mutuality says that everybody has the same wants that we do, and they have the same right to get those needs met, just as we do. But the primitive ego doesn't like that. The primitive ego goes to war when somebody else tries to insist that they get more than we do, okay? Another way to think about that is if you have to give something away, it feels like you're giving yourself away, okay? Primitive ego takes care of its self-identity by being very, very self-focused and always asking what's in it for me. Okay, second, dualism. The primitive ego loves to think in black and white terms, either or, all or nothing. It's the basic concept that if you offer the primitive ego 2 choices, it can't just hold those 2 choices. It'll always pick one side is right and the other side is wrong. So again, our goal now in this whole book is self-awareness. If we see ourselves doing that, if we have trouble holding 2 truths and looking for the wisdom in both of them, and we have a tendency to want to go into that black and white thinking and the concept of being right versus wrong, the only thing it's really telling you is that you're getting a good look at your primitive ego, okay? And that's our goal. Pay attention to that. The primitive ego, okay, knows exactly how the world should work, how others should be, how others shouldn't be, and all of our beliefs are absolute truths. Now, how do we test that? Well, that's really simple. Think of the person that drives you crazy out there, okay? That person is probably challenging all your beliefs. No matter what you come up with, they come up with something else, right? And it drives you nuts. The only thing that's happening is that they're not listening to you because you do have absolute truth and you know what should and shouldn't be, and you are always going to want to be right. Now, is there anything wrong with that? No. It's just your primitive ego. But if you want to be successful and if you want happy relationships with those around you, be careful, because the primitive ego will shoot us in the foot every single time. And that's what our book is about, is learning how to pay attention when the primitive ego comes out. Now, let me give you a warning right now. The primitive ego is not bad. It's not evil. It's just little. It's immature. It hasn't evolved yet. That's all. So when we begin to look into our primitive ego and pay attention to ourselves, then what we need to do is just be really gentle. The primitive ego is only trying to take care of our self-identity, that's all. But our job is to shift that work over to the more adult observing consciousness. Okay, primitive ego loves to blame. Third big point. Others make me feel, okay? I have a very simple example that I use in workshops on that, and this is the rabbit, the bunny rabbit, and the snake, or the spider, okay? And what I do is I say, pretend that I walk up and I put a snake or a spider right in your face. You'd probably get scared and jump, okay, and back away. Now, I'm going to put the spider down, and then I'm going to pick up my little bunny rabbit, and I'm going to put that right in your face. Most people in the workshop say, oh, can I pet it? Let me hold it, okay? What they just proved is that they have no fear inside of a bunny rabbit, but they do have a fear of spiders and snakes, right? So when you put a snake in someone's face and you scare them, they say, you made me feel scared. But that's not true. There's a bent nickel belief, because nobody can make you feel anything that isn't already inside you, right? Now we're going to test that. That's a tough one for a lot of people to really get a hold of. What I like to look at it is this way. If you got a really bad headache, it's like running across the street and handing the neighbor in the house across the street an aspirin and make them take the aspirin because you have the headache, right? Our goal is self-awareness. If you find yourself reacting with a lot of feelings, instead of blaming others, use that as an opportunity to say, okay, what's going on inside? What belief just got triggered, okay? Because there's view of your primitive ego again, which is our work. Next big idea, number 4, vertical power. The primitive ego loves to have power over. It wants to be in charge of everything. Now, if you think about it, when we're little and we need our diaper changed, or we're hungry, or we just don't feel good, or we got a stomach ache, or we have to burp, or whatever, what do? We open our mouth and we scream bloody murder, right? And eventually somebody comes and picks us up and takes care of us. That's what the primitive ego is always doing. It's survival of the fittest. Open your mouth and scream. The mature ego, the more enlightened adult ego, has horizontal power rather than vertical power. Because this is a power over. And the only way that power over has any power is if you can make the other person afraid. For example, a boss has a lot of power. Why? Because the people under him could get fired. So the boss says, if he's working out, or she is working out of a primitive ego, oh, wow, I have a lot of power. You really don't. You just have the power to frighten someone and they appear to give in to you. If you're working out of your adult self, then cooperation, compromise, and teamwork are how you come at the world, okay? And this is a horizontal power versus the primitive ego vertical power. Okay, I go into that in a lot more detail in the book. 5th big idea. When we love others out of our primitive ego, it will always be conditional, not unconditional. In other words, we cannot manifest a continued compassion or love unless the other people that we're loving are in total agreement with all of our beliefs. And if they are willing to be in total agreement, then our primitive ego can smile and say, I can love unconditionally. The minute someone disagrees, all of a sudden our unconditional love is liable to turn quite judgmental, pretty aggressive, and certainly go into conditional mode. When people argue with our primitive ego, and here's the way that we can begin now to, again, look inside and grow in self-awareness. When other people argue with us and we can feel that energy coming up, remind ourselves of one thing. Anybody who is in conflict with us is probably just telling us who they are, what they believe, what they think about the world, okay? The moment we can recognize that they're not really saying we're wrong, they're more saying that they're right, okay? Why? Because that's what the primitive ego does. So you're just getting to see their primitive ego. You don't have to follow them down that path of aggression and conflict. You can just step back and say, they're telling me who they are, and I'm feeling some energy about that. Maybe I best look inside and see what's going on. Okay? What's the belief there that they're challenging? Okay? What are we doing on a bottom line in this book is we're learning to pay attention to the kind of energy that we're sending out into the world. Is it dark energy? Is it aggressive? Is it blaming, critical? Or does it tend to be more compassionate, light, more loving? Okay? When we pay attention to the energy, what it does is that it shifts our self-focus back into our primitive ego, and we get a chance to see what's going on in the shadows of our unconscious. Okay? All right? Primitive ego loves conditionally. Only when people agree with us. The primitive ego loves vertical power, open our mouth and scream, demand, because we got survival of the fittest. Blame others because they make us feel, which is an illusion. All these are bent nickels, by the way. Dualism, can't hold two truths without picking one and then making that one absolute truth. Okay? And most of the conflict in the world today is because somebody's holding on to a belief or an ideology and claiming that it's absolute truth. We'll look at that further down, further into the book, and when we get into middle path thinking. But for now, just recognize that dualism is the favorite consciousness or mode of being for our primitive ego. And our primitive ego tends to be very narcissistic, very self-focused, always asking, what's in it for me? Again, as you look at these things, you're going to see some energy. Pay attention to it because it'll give you insight into what's going on in your primitive ego. And our goal, of course, is to grow in self-awareness, change ourselves, not others. Okay? All right. We'll see you down the road. Have a good week.